Welcome to our KMOS pre-election special. I'm Scott Faughn, joined by the Kansas City legend Mike Mahoney. Thank you for making the time, sir.
You bet.
Stephanie Bell, radio fame, attorney fame. The list is too long. Alderwoman fame.
Glad to be here, Scott.
State Representative Keri, Ingle, Jackson County. Thank you for making the time.
Thanks for having me.
And we are booking it by another Kansas City legend, Dave Helling of the Kansas City Star. Thank you so much for making the time.
Quite the legend of Mahoney, but close.
We're booking it with legendary bookings, right? Let's start off the show talking about what it's kind of odd. Some of the elections can be a little boring this year in a red-dominated state. But the ballot measures are interesting. Let's start with Amendment 2 about sports wagering.
Well, there are all kinds of ballot measures, and Scott, you're right. It says something about the legislature that most of the important decisions are now made by the people at referenda. And Amendment 2 is at the top of the list this year, which of course is sports betting, or the legalization of sports gambling in the state of Missouri. In a normal year, that might be the most important thing on the ballot. It hasn't gotten quite the attention that Amendment 3, the abortion measure, has. And I think that it may be closer, in my mind, Amendment 2 may be closer than people think, in part because I don't think voters really buy this, all the extra money for education. I don't think voters, they've been down the riverboat gambling trail, they've been down the lottery trail. They're very mistrustful of the idea that this is going to solve our problems in education, which is, I'm surprised that the campaign hasn't emphasized a little bit more, hey, this would be, gambling would be just a good thing. They do it in other states. Why can't we do it in Missouri? Instead, they put all their eggs in this sort of education funding basket, and I'm not sure it's going to be closer, I think, than people think.
Mike Mahoney, did the campaign make a mistake in talking about this education money? Why didn't they just put Patrick Mahomes out there and say, hey, let's bet on the Chiefs?
No, I think that's a right read on this. By virtue of the experience of the state of Missouri with the lottery and the fact that the DESE budget for just elementary schools alone is $4 billion. Even if you throw, several million at it, it's a $4 billion operation, and that's relatively small amount of money, even though it's millions. I know it's a lot, and I think the point that campaigning on the fact that, look, a lot of states do this. A lot of Missourians already gamble. Let's get a piece of the action. Should have been a little bit better of a campaign theme than they've got. I don't think that the experience with the lottery and education in Missouri and how that played out settles the question for a lot of Missourians. And I agree. I think it's closer than a lot of people think.
You're very engaged in these issues. To me, I see all these Republicans get elected talking about liberty and freedom, but I'm starting to think maybe they only want you to have the liberty and freedoms they like, and they want the government to enforce a whole bunch of stuff they don't. Why would anybody that is there for liberty and freedom have a problem with you laying $10 on the Chiefs?
Well, as a proud member of the libertarian wing of the Republican Party, I seem to think that people should be able to bet on sports, but it's an uphill battle. Not only do you have folks who just vote no on all constitutional amendments, you've also got folks who are just going to vote no on all gambling. And then with sports betting, the facts are that a lot of women don't sports bet. So if you're counting on just the male vote, then to come out and vote yes,
Is that why they did the education stuff? Making a case to people that don't bet on sports?
I don't know. I think one of the better arguments would be like Kansas does it. Why are we letting all of our people go to Kansas and do it? I think we should have led with that. But I think it's going to be very, very close, especially with, there was a lot of money spent in this race and a lot of money against it.
Well, you didn't have the casinos on the same page. Some of these casinos have bought sports books like DraftKings or whatever, Bally's. But I guess Caesars has not invested in that, and they came out very heavily to sink the measure. And if it fails, I think it'll be because Caesars sunk it.
It's going to be, there are differences of opinions. I think one pro for some of the sports betting folks is that it does bring in a younger audience. And as casino audiences age, I think that's one pro. So you might see some differing opinions in the industry on sports betting. But I think, the legislature has tried for years and years and years to make, to get something, or the industry's tried with the legislature to get something done. And I think they were just so frustrated, they finally threw up their hands and said, we got to go forward.
See, I want to ratify Stephanie's point on that. The Missouri legislature has tied itself in knots over these video terminals at convenience stores and truck stops throughout the state. If Missouri and the legislature wanted to do this. They've had, what, 4 different sessions at least, perhaps 5, where they could have got this done and not be in the predicament that we think they are now.
Well, in fairness, though, the person that was the ultimate stalemate on that issue is now out of the Senate, so perhaps we would have had another opportunity this coming session.
Do you think so? I think they would have. You're talking about Senator Denny Hoskins now going to be the Secretary of State. Does it really matter? Well, they're just not. I think it was an interest group, and he took a lot of the swings. So new opposition
force will rise?
Well, I mean, Caesar's came in. If this dies at the ballot, it'll be because A2 Caesar, they killed it. They're probably going to have a lobbyist that's got some friends in the Missouri Senate that want to do the same thing. I mean, I hear the argument of we could have a better deal for the state. Well, you know what? You can't have a better deal for the state if you can't pass the bill.
Right.
And if I was the sports teams, how do you argue with them saying we tried to work with the legislature? You're impossible to work with.
Scott, the sports teams are the most ham-handed politicians I think I've ever seen in a 40-year career.
Yep.
The teams are horrible at politics. We saw that in Kansas City, of course, on the stadium question in April. And on this question, you've got Ozzie Smith on a commercial.
In Kansas City.
In Kansas City.
Why?
We're not sure, who Ozzie Smith is sometimes. But you've got,
the guy
instead of having Patrick Mahomes or Bobby Witt or someone recognizable from the teams to step forward and be the face of this effort, because the teams really want gambling, in part because gambling inside the stadium is going to come to America sooner rather than later. And yet they don't seem to understand how to interface with voters, with the public, how to take a public position. They sort of want to be in the race, but not in the race. Well, we're for this, but not really.
And the Chiefs don't want to commit.
And in Jefferson City, it's the same sort of thing. Can we do this quietly so that I don't have to go down and testify, and I don't have to be on the record on this? And so if it fails, I think some people will look at the teams, the Cardinals, the Royals, the Chiefs, some of the other professional franchises, and say, look, you've got to be all in or all out, but this sort of straddling is not winning you many votes.
Straddling would be exactly how I would say their legislative strategy's been.
Correct.
Not wanting, and it was the same way at this ballot measure. I don't understand. I understand why you have Ozzie Smith on the eastern side of the state. Yeah. I don't understand why George Brett's on the other side. Right. But Mike, want to give me a prediction? Does Amendment 2 pass?
Barely.
What do you think?
I will say it fails by just barely.
What do you think?
I think it barely passes because there are a lot of single issue sports betting voters. That is the one thing that they know when you knock on their door what your stance is on sports betting and whether they support you or not. I've seen it time again.
I think it'll pass in part because the moral question has been answered. We have the lottery, we have riverboat gaming, we could have horse racing if we ever got around to it. Missourians have endorsed gambling as a thing in their state, and I think they'll look at other states and say, why can't we do the same?
I think getting to know is awful easy, especially when you have TV behind it. I think I might be with Stephanie on this one. Let's talk, though, about, I think what is the biggest thing on the ballot in Missouri, if you want the truth. It is Amendment 3. It discusses abortion rights. Keri Ingle, you have been a passionate supporter of Amendment 3. Give me the down and dirty quick case for Amendment 3.
Yeah, Amendment 3. So in May of 2019, the Republican legislature passed the most restrictive abortion law in the country. There's no exceptions for rape or incest. There's very, very fuzzy language pertaining to the life and health of the mother. And the people across the state are overwhelmingly on both sides of the aisle, and independents included, are very much in favor of the government staying out of their personal choices. That's to be made between them, their family, God, and their doctor. Not Missouri legislators.
Stephanie Bell, I was so glad when you had time to be on today because you probably make the best case I hear against Amendment 3. How'd you come down on it?
Sure, I've been working with a group called Missouri Stands with Women, and in reviewing the actual language, and that's what we're really encouraging people to go out and do. Don't just listen to what people are saying about the measure, but read it for yourself. And when you read it, what you find is it's going to enshrine in our Constitution taxpayer-funded abortion up until birth, late-term abortions. It will ultimately eliminate some of the health protections that we have in place right now for women. In other states where similar measures have passed, you've seen things like the requirement that only physicians conduct abortions, a prohibition on telemedicine. Those things are going out the window, and those things are in place to protect women's health. I also, as a mother of 3, I have concerns about the abolition of parental rights, notice, consent. the fact that my daughter could go get, have a serious conversation, whether it be about abortion or transgender issues, without my notification or consent, I have problems with. And then also later in the measure, you find a provision that provides provider immunity. And whether you're whether you're seeking an abortion or you're carrying a healthy pregnancy to term, if a doctor does something horrible and you're injured, it potentially removes your ability to seek any remedy. And I think all Missourians should be concerned about that.
Mike Mahoney, if you're just an old boy eating the burger house in California, you probably are a little more pro-choice in the current law, but is there an argument to be made that this Amendment 3 would take you further than you want to go toward the pro-choice side?
Well, no, I don't think so. I think Missourians are uncomfortable. Missouri voters are uncomfortable with where the law is now. Okay, and they believe that there ought to be some exceptions for sure, and that and they're there, and that the state of Missouri and women in the state of Missouri and families, all of us in Missouri, this is a very personal choice, very personal decision that has to be made, and the state of the Missouri law right now is oppressive, and I think there's going to be, Amendment 3 is going to coast.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the wind is at the back of the pro-choice community. I mean, they are all aligned. They are very well funded. They're facing an opposition that is not funded. You're facing an opposition that hates each other. I mean, let's be honest. If you go to Jeff City, the only thing pro-lifers hate more than abortion is other pro-lifers. I mean, it is just a blood sport. Hypothetically, if the pro-life community beats this amendment back, man, I just think the pro-choice community is in shambles. You're never going to have a better shot than this.
Well, that's probably true. And if it fails, if Amendment 3 fails, then the avalanche of anti-abortion bills in the legislature will, flood the desk. I mean, all kinds of.
Well, either way.
In vitro fertilization is on the table. Other reproductive rights will be on the table, I think, in Jefferson City. I think those who now complain that Amendment 3 goes too far, in some ways, Scott, missed their chance in the legislature 5 or 6 years ago to be more moderate,
right.
And you wouldn't have needed this amendment. But to go to
I think when they
90
passed
miles
it,
an
they
hour,
never thought Roe would be overturned.
I'm positive.
whether they thought that or not, it has come to pass.
Yeah.
Now I will tell you
that's
that
true.
I think I live in Kansas and covered Kansas politics and was in Kansas 2 years ago when an amendment was proposed for the Kansas Constitution that would prevent abortion access. It was kind of the flip of what's going on in Missouri. And I think we all thought that was close as it could possibly be. And it ended up losing by about 18 or 19 points. But I think there's a pretty aggressive vote in Midwestern states from women primarily who say, in essence, we had a right, that right was taken away, we don't like that. And I think to their credit, the pro-Amendment 3 people have framed the race in that context. This is about women's rights. It's not about the procedure
Easier to frame a race
itself.
when your opponent has no money, though.
Well, I mean,
the other thing to remember here is on the assumption that Amendment 3 passes, okay, that is not the end of this.
not even close.
By any stretch of the imagination.
Well,
There'll be a whole bunch of lawsuits about it. I mean, even on the threshold of what is viability.
Sure.
Is it 24 weeks? Is it something less
this
than that?
is not
it
the
more
final
than
say
that?
on this subject by any means.
By no
But let me
means.
just ask you, what do you think happens? Give me a prediction. Does this pass?
No, I think it passes. Like I say,
margin?
it cruises.
Give me a margin.
58.
Oh, what do you think?
No, I think it fails, just barely, or I think it's going to be really close. You talk, Scott, about the movement being divided, but if we put this in any other context and say you had 12 different business groups all out there working against the minimum wage hike, everyone would be like, isn't that great that all of these groups coming together are messaging on the same thing. They're spending their own resources to talk to voters, their friends, their neighbors, their churches about how horrible this amendment is. That's exactly what's happening on the
Missouri
pro-life.
Right to Life can't even endorse Mike Kehoe.
Right.
I agree that was a misstep.
I mean, it's becoming a joke even to itself.
But all of these groups are united in opposing Amendment 3, and I think you see that in your
They
neighborhoods.
can't even agree on a yard sign.
Does it matter? Do you have to have the same yard sign? I don't think it does.
I think, Keri, your election campaign, right? You have
Yes.
yard signs.
Yes,
They all look alike,
absolutely.
right?
Correct.
The pro-life people can't agree. I actually think I would have been with Mike Mahoney 2 weeks ago. I think the religious community has rallied to this. I think the gap is narrowing, but I don't think it narrows to where it beats it. I think it passes, but I'm more 52-48 than I am.
Well, campaigns
as
always
good as
narrow
me.
at the end.
And I think this one is narrowing. What do you think?
I agree with Mike. I think it's around 58. And I also agree with you, Scott, on just the division between the anti-choice movement. We've seen, that there have already been attacks within the Republican caucus against future Speaker John Patterson for having a more nuanced view on abortion and saying during a Lee Summit Chamber event this past week that he does not believe that abortion ban is working in the state of Missouri. And so he doesn't, and he is supporting upholding the will of the people should Amendment 3 pass.
And Patterson goes even one step further in that same discussion and says, if it passes, let the voters stand on this and not try to nuance its way through with legislation.
What happens Tuesday?
I think on November 5th, the amendment will pass 53-47, and on November 6th, the Republicans will be at the courthouse steps in Cole County suing
Maybe
to stop about every provision.
Is this the Stephanie Bell Employment Act?
Because what Mike has talked about is absolutely accurate. There is a whole string of statutory references to abortion in the state's law books, all of which will have to be challenged at some level if Amendment 3 is to take effect, and that means we will be in court for months, perhaps years, figuring out what it exactly
means. We are likely 2 years from now back here on this set discussing another amendment on the Constitution. I mean, I think this is going to be a very messy process for Missourians to decide where they're going to be on abortion.
Right, although again, Kansas may be illustrative. I think Republicans all talked a good game after the amendment failed in Kansas in 2022, and yet have not been able to really muster an effort to go back to voters, to do something constitutionally. They're still probing at the edges legislatively. Can we do this? Can we do that? Based on what the court has said. And by the way, the court in Kansas has said, no, we meant what we said. There is an absolute right, personal right to abortion in Kansas. And I think you'll see the same thing in Missouri, because I do think some legislators are scared about going back and back and back to the people until the people say, no, we meant what we said at the ballot box.
Bill, I think they'll run right into that wall.
Well, it's such an important point, though, because this is enshrining that in our Constitution. And right now, if you're a person who wants exceptions, you can elect other legislators who want exceptions, and that can be done legislatively. If we put this in the Constitution and we want to tweak it in any way, say maybe we think, hey, after a couple years, a doctor should have to perform these types of procedures. If we want to tweak that, guess what? It's in the Constitution, and it's out of our hands and in the courts, and that's another reason to vote against Amendment 3.
I do think, if you looked at what the options were, Keri, we talked about this on this show, the pro-choice community did get a little aggressive. Like, they went for kind of what they would ideally want to have instead of something more pared down. This is pretty much what a pro-choice person would want the law to be, right?
I agree. I think that this is, it's without getting into the legalese specifics, I think it's basically Roe as far as viability goes. There are parameters around it. It is, we are anticipating that the legislature will come in and put in other guidelines. It's just setting a strict constitutional mandate that bars them from overstepping.
I think they will rise to that occasion of passing laws related to abortion in here. And I think maybe, if I had to guess, they'll run right through that barrier that the Kansas legislature has kind of held up. So much of Missouri politics is tied around abortion. I think we're going to be talking about it for a long time.
Wait a minute now, Scott. Go to Kansas sometime. Kansas has been about abortion for 20 years.
I covered the
Chris Kobach is the Attorney General.
But the dynamics of the right to life movement in the state of Missouri is far different than it is in the state of Kansas. Partly because number one, as we were talking about earlier, there was a right to an abortion in the Kansas Constitution, and there wasn't in the state of Missouri. And as long as I have lived in Missouri, which is going on to 45 years now, the right to life movement has been pretty vigorous in the state. And there are pockets of right to life vigor in Kansas, most assuredly. I mean,
Wichita, Operation Rescue.
Kansas
Dr.
history,
Teller. Right? Kansas's history with abortion is just as aggressive as Missouri's.
I don't think it is.
And they were stunned when they lost by 20 points 2 years ago.
Sure,
I think there was a real
they'll be
message there.
surprised by this if it does pass, but we're going to be surprised by it. We don't take a break. We'll be right back. We'll talk about these border wars. We'll also talk a little statewide Missouri politics when we come back after this. Welcome back to our KMOS pre-election special. The panel stuck around. Now let's talk about, we've talked about these ballot initiatives. Now let's get into talking about some of these actual campaigns. You know the Democrat nominee for governor very well, Keri Ingle.
I do.
Crystal Quaid, someone that has a lot of respect in Jefferson City. Obviously an uphill challenge. How's the campaign going?
She's doing great. The campaign is doing really, really well. We're reaching out to voters across the state. Crystal is going on a tour of the entire state and trying to talk to as many voters as possible.
So, Stephanie, you're affiliated with the Keogh campaign. I mean, honestly, when Mike Keogh won this primary, how you beat Mike Keogh in Missouri?
I don't know how you do it. I mean, if you were to dream up a candidate for governor, he's it. Whether you're talking law enforcement, agriculture, small business, economic development, he's going to make a great governor for Missouri. And while I know he's working hard in this race and he's not taking anything for granted and he's really focused on that November election, as one has to be, I think the numbers right now are in his favor.
On election night, Crystal Quaid would have had more fun if she was running against John Ashcroft's son or Bill Ingle, right?
Undoubtedly, just for the pure humor of it, yeah.
Mike Mahoney, when I see Mike Keogh visit with folks, whether it's up in Sheridan, Missouri, or whether it's in Blue Springs, he just kind of comes off like the governor. He comes off like Missouri. I don't know how you beat that guy in this state in 2024.
No, you're right. He comes off on a real personable level to all sorts of Missourians. I mean, he can talk turkey with a farmer, and then he can go in and discuss, serious amounts of finance and issues as well. So Crystal Quaid has got a most uphill battle here. Would have been nice, I think, if she would have had some more money, but she didn't. But I don't think even outspending the Keogh campaign would have made a difference in red Missouri in 2024.
There might have been, may still be a path for her if she outperforms expectations around Springfield, where she's from, and Greene County and the southwest part of the state, which is a Republican stronghold typically. If she does better than expected down there by maybe 8-10 points, then I think you'll have presidential turnouts in Kansas City and St. Louis, which might help a little bit. And while Mike Keogh is a great candidate, he's not well known in the state, not perhaps as well known as, say, a Jay Ashcroft would have been, obviously, with that name. So I think it's a very narrow path for Crystal Quaid, but I don't think all the returns are.
There was a mix you needed to have a realistic shot. There's probably Joe Biden, who I think Missourians were palatable with. If he was, if he was the 2020 Joe Biden, if you had the abortion measure going to win by 65-35, and if you had a different Republican, there was a mix there. But this reminds me of when Jay Nixon ran against John Danforth. You're going to see Crystal Quaid's name again, just like you saw Jay Nixon's name again.
Because she's very talented. I do think the abortion issue in her race particularly may cut two ways, because I do think you can find some people in Missouri who will say, yeah, I'll vote yes on Amendment 3, but that's as far as I'm going to go. I'm not going to go for the Democrats, not only for governor, but in down ballot races. And I think that hurts her a little bit. I mean, I think the assumption originally, Scott, was that the abortion issue would help Democrats on the ballot. I'm not sure in Missouri that's true.
I think it might be true in St. Louis. I'm not sure if it's true in Kansas City.
Well, and I think it depends on how closely suburban candidates and urban candidates are tying themselves to that issue. We find that Republican suburban candidates are running as far as they possibly can from the issue and trying to divorce themselves from their votes and their views on it over the last few years because it's so overwhelmingly popular in the suburbs. Whereas Democrats, like myself, when we're knocking on doors, that's something that we're talking to with voters every single door.
But are they jumping to Crystal Quaid is the question.
We're talking about her on the doors, absolutely.
4 years ago, right after Missouri had restricted abortion, Nicole Galloway tried to pivot her campaign around abortion and thought that would be a galvanizing issue, and it didn't work then. I think the situation is different this year, much different, but I'm not sure. In fact, I'm convinced it's not going to be enough to get her over the line.
I want a prediction from you guys. I think, for Crystal Quaid, young politician, bright future, probably would be a top candidate in a state Senate seat in Springfield if this doesn't go well. Jay Nixon was a state senator when he ran for state was the first time in a race that he lost by a significant margin. Does Crystal Quaid place better than Nicole Galloway did 4 years ago?
Yeah, I think so.
I actually think so. What do you think?
I don't think so. I think Kehoe's going to outperform Trump, and I think he's going to outperform Parson in the last election.
You have to think on election night, she was like, man, it could have been the other two.
Well, does she do better than Galloway? I'm gonna say yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
I actually
absolutely.
do too, and I think part of that's Amendment 3, but I think part of it is, that narrowing gap, Trump on the ballot for the third time. What do you think? Does she do better than Galloway?
I think about the same, but I think the fundamental problem statewide for Democrats is still in place. It's very difficult we could talk about the down ballot races. The Democrats don't have any chance in those races. Because the party, and I think Lucas Kunce is going to come up short. I don't know if we'll get to that or not, but in the Senate race, the Democrats have got to figure out what they can do, if anything, to improve their chances statewide. And if Crystal Quade fails, that will be a large part of the equation. Democrats just can't get over the hump.
If she fails, will she be on another statewide ballot in the future?
No, I don't think so. Now, she might run for the state Senate and maybe auditor, which is the one place Democrats might have a chance, but it isn't, unless she wants to run against Eric Schmidt or run in 4 years for governor. Democrats just don't have the formula, Scott, for statewide elections in a way they used to.
Well, I think 10 years from now she's on the statewide ballot.
Yeah, and I want to push back on that a little bit, because since 2018, Democrats have picked up seats in the House every single cycle.
With her at the helm.
Meaning Republicans have lost seats.
In the state legislature?
Yes.
Yeah, but I'm talking statewide. You can win in a district.
That's how you ultimately win statewide,
you
is
can
by building up your bench, by getting out there and
You did see the
those
Republicans take the legislature first, and they swept the statewide offices. There was a correlation there.
Yeah.
But you had some historical 92 issues and things. Do you think you see Crystal Quade's name on the statewide ballot again?
Yes.
I do too. What do you think?
Yeah,
And I think
do
it's
too.
a very good thing.
For what?
I could see her running for that state Senate seat. Then 10 years from now, the climate changes.
You mean the U.S. Senate seat?
No, the state Senate seat.
Well, that's not a
Springfield.
statewide ballot.
No,
But I
that's
think
not what he's saying.
You extend her career out that way, and then by the time Democrats can compete again, you have somebody that's ran statewide, that's built a donor base, and is very talented. I think you have to extend the runway for a Democrat to compete.
We'll see.
And the Democrats are going to put up somebody on that ballot, and who would they put up before her, honestly? I mean, I think if she serves in the Senate.
Against
Schmidt, Kehoe.
Anybody. They're going to put somebody on that ballot.
Well,
and I think
eventually she
she'd be
will
at the top of my
tire being a
list.
punching bag until the Democrats can figure out how to carry statewide elections, not district elections, but statewide elections. And by the time they do that, which they may well do, Mahoney and I will be 106 years old, and we'll have to come back on your show and talk about it.
You have to zoom in from the old folks home. Mike, let's talk about these. There's a couple state Senate races very near here where we're taping at KMOS at Warrensburg. Independents. Ronnie DePasco, Victor Callahan, the Lavotas, John Rizzo. Did you ever think that the partisan advantage would favor the Republican in that state Senate seat?
Well, I'm not sure that in this race it does. From the standpoint, and I think it's a question of the candidates involved as much as anything else. I think the Democrat in this, Robbie Sauls, is a darn good candidate. He's a state representative, and he's got a track record down in Jeff City, and Joe Nicola has run for office in the past, but even though he says he's going to be a pro-business Republican, if he gets elected, I could see him joining the Freedom Caucus quite easily. And there's been his past record and some of his sermons and things that he has said in the past about not believing there's a division between church and state, that sort of thing. I don't think that goes well with voters.
Well, I think there's a partisan advantage there. I think that the question are the folks in Independents Trump voters, or are they becoming Republicans? Because there might be a difference.
Mm-hmm. There is a difference.
Yeah, I think there is a difference. And, I don't have a great read on Kansas City, but I don't think when we're talking about the 3 contested races that we're going to sweep them all. And I
feels right.
Yeah.
So you're very familiar. It's just up the street from you.
Yeah.
Joe Nicola, a minister, not a big campaign war chest. I mean, he's having to do this on the doors. And I do think independence is changing. I mean, if you just look at who takes a primary ballot, that district is radically different since Trump ran. I just wonder how many of them show up and vote for Trump and leave, or they stick around and vote for folks like Joe Nicola.
Yeah, that was a really hotly contested Senate primary, as was his Senate primary a couple years ago when he tried to primary my state senator, Mike Searpoy, unsuccessfully. I think that he is far too radical to be elected in independence.
Do people know that?
I think that if they, yes, I think that that's absolutely the message that's coming out from Robbie Salz's campaign, is that this is someone who believes that mental illness is demonic possession. He's taken money from his church to fund his campaign, and frankly, independence voters are not there. These are old school Democrats. These are old school Republicans, and they're above all of that. They pick people that are right down the center of the line, that are steadfast, and people that they can agree to disagree with.
Yeah, I think Sauls is hoping the ghost of Harry Truman will waft over the polling place on November 5th. And I do think that comparisons between now and, say, 10 years ago are a little off because of redistricting and new boundaries, new numbers. I mean, it's you know, to think that somehow Joe Nicola might win in J.J. Rizzo's district is certainly confusing to most people, and I think that's plays into part of this as well. But I think Sauls has been a solid candidate. He's on television in Kansas City.
Been doing his doors.
Been doing some doors, so he's got a little bit of money. You don't see Nicola anywhere, and at least on television. So I'd call that a toss-up at this point.
Well, I think it's a toss-up too, and I think it's amazing that we're saying it's a toss-up. Yeah. I think it really is a toss-up, but don't count Nicola out. The guy, he ran Searpoy a close race, and he, by all rights, should have. He beat a guy that was much better funded in McMullen, and I think on Election Day, sometimes, especially the more Trump gins folks up, when you really overperform. Trump doesn't overperform in Springfield. He doesn't overperform in Central Missouri. He overperforms in the Boot Hill, Jeffco, South County, St. Louis, and Eastern Jack. That's where Trump overperforms a normal Republican. A little bit
north of the river in Kansas City.
A little bit of the same Eastern Jack rim. Yeah. Let's talk about going north of the river up in the Northland, place you know very well, Mike Mahoney. I thought Maggie Nurnberg, a top-flight Democrat recruit, a future star in the party, was going to walk into that seat. Then Jerry Nolte files. I don't know that people think of Jerry Nolte as a Republican. I think they think of him as Jerry.
Yeah, I think that's a good assessment. If there's a flip, I think this is where it happens, is in the 17th.
Wow. You think Jerry's got a better shot than Nicola?
Yes, I do. I do, mainly because Jerry Nolte is a proven product in Clay County politics. Okay?
Very much so.
But hang
on. Let me finish the thought here. Nurnberg is also a very, very good candidate, and a good legislator. And if it were anybody except Jerry Nolte, this would be a lay-down race.
Yeah.
But Nolte performs well in his past elections inside of the boundaries of the 17th at the time, and he is well known and well liked in the district. This is not his for the taking by any stretch of the imagination. We'll see what happens. You know how they do the doors and their closing message in this the last week or so. But you know, this is the one where if there's a Republican flip, this might be it.
Stephanie Bell, Maggie should win this race. I mean, this is a district Democrats have carried. Jerry Nolte is just the one guy I could think of in that district that could run her a good race here.
Well, and when I think about my own district there in Boone County, you know, when Stephen Weber decided he was going to run, we can all name on one hand the Republicans that have a chance to beat Stephen Weber. The problem is those people aren't going to run. I don't know how they convinced Nolte to run, but he's the one guy who, if anyone would be able to take her on. I mean, I've known her for many years since our college days. No one works harder. I see she's out all the time. But again, they picked the perfect candidate, and I think it's going to be really close.
Yeah. I would just add quickly that Jerry Nolte's record in Clay County is not unblemished. I mean, his service on the county commission was extraordinarily controversial.
That always blood his jaw.
Yeah, there was a war with other folks who were on the commission and legal investigations.
Will the Republicans vote for Jerry Nolte? Well, that's where some of his critics are mostly on the Republican side, right?
Right, and whether or and he needs every vote he can get.
Absolutely.
I mean, it isn't as if he goes in with a 10 or 15 point advantage in that district. So he's a strong candidate, no question, but his past record is not 100% a guarantee of getting reelected up there.
In terms of context here, he was in a very dysfunctional county county government.
That's very charitable.
But people don't, you and I know that, Mike, and maybe the people around this table. But voters just remember the Jerry Nolte name and the lawsuits and the closed meeting, all that stuff. And it may be enough to cost him 2-3%, which in this race could be meaningful.
Maggie Nurnberg has a motor that doesn't stop.
Right. Maggie cannot be outworked. She absolutely fits that district. She was Lauren Arthur's heir apparent. That is a Democratic district, and I would put money on it.
I'm with you. I think Maggie wins, but I think Jerry has made this race a race and more enjoyable. And I happen to. Jerry's just likable. Boy, it's just hard not to like him.
And I don't know him at all. I just know my friend Maggie Nurnburn, who's been working her butt off for years.
Who wins this race? You still feel Maggie?
Yes.
I do too.
In part because the Lauren Arthur experience, because I think she was in a 50-50 race and won rather comfortably last time, and she's well respected in that district, in that area. I think, talking about statewide races someday, Lauren Arthur is an extraordinarily talented candidate and should be considered by Democrats, particularly since, by the way, statewide candidates from the Kansas City region are few and far between, and she ought to step forward. So I think, Maggie wins.
Who wins that race?
I think Maggie wins it ultimately.
But I go back to, I agree with you, but I think Jerry, I think he's running a great race. What do you think?
I think Maggie wins that race, but I stand by what I said, is that if there's a flip, 17's a possibility.
It's amazing how we talk about these. Let's talk about the 15th. If there's, the polling I've seen shows support for Amendment 3 in the Kansas City media market for sure. But in St. Louis, it's very intense. There's a state Senate race with David Gregory, Joe Peerless. Joe Peerless, good recruit from the Democrats. If there's a race where abortion turns the tide, it might be that 15th Senate district in Chesterfield.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I mean, it's clear on the other end of the state from me, and so I've just sort of watched it at 20,000 feet. But that's I hear the same thing.
I think the intensity on the abortion issue is just higher. Frankly, St. Louisans are sort of easily to quarrel with, right? It's
certainly higher in the St. Louis region, and I've got friends in that district, and they said their mailboxes have just been flooded over the last couple of weeks. A lot of negative Gregory pieces. And then I think also the involvement in the business community and how that has kind of crossed party lines, I think also adds an interesting flair to that race.
You do have trial attorneys supporting the Republican, unions support, and business groups are supporting the Democrat and unions. It is a weird mix over there.
Yeah, we're experiencing a realignment of allies across the board. I think both of the parties would agree with that.
Yeah, you guys might know this better about St. Louis than Mike or I would know, but will the scandals involving St. Louis city government and violent crime and some of the other problems depress turnout in St. Louis City? That could be have some impact on the abortion vote and some other statewide races, not just the Senate race.
I find the early voting. I'm from West Butler County. I don't view it as my role to take up for the poor people of Chesterfield or St. Louis. But I'll tell you this: I think it's disenfranchising the lines they have to wait in. I think a reasonable person raising a family and working a job cannot get to the polls when the lines are 2 hours. I think it's wrong. And for me, the state to talk about voter integrity and Mexicans voting and all this and not address that is hypocrisy.
Yeah,
it's just not fair. But we have a wait. We're going to get you off the air if we don't take a break here. We'll come back. We're going to talk Donald J. Trump after this. Welcome back to our final segment of our KMOS election special. Let's talk about the national mood. Mike Mahoney, I've always felt like Donald Trump runs a little bit better than he polls. It feels like he's got a little momentum. Am I wrong?
I think he's had momentum. I also think that Kamala Harris has had a good few days down the stretch, the last weekend before the election day.
How?
It's just the message seems a little cleaner.
Trump does not have a clean message. His is always jumbled.
He doesn't. I thought that Madison Square Garden rally on the a few days ago on Sunday was a weird trip, to say the least.
I used to think Barack Obama baited people to say he wasn't born in America because there were normal people that made them sound stupid.
Right.
I think calling Trump Hitler to normal people makes the person calling him Hitler sound stupid. He was president for 4 years. He didn't do Hitler things. I think having a rally at MSG, I think he baited people into saying dumb things that help him.
Yeah, I think Kamala Harris wins the popular vote. I'm not sure she wins the Electoral College.
Keri, Ingle, I think it comes down to this. It's very hard for a vice president to get elected because I watch people tell Kamala Harris, I've got all these great ideas. I'm going to do all these great things. And the interviewer says, well, why didn't you do that already? It is a tough thing for a vice president to answer. I think it's hard to have a message when a rational person could say, well, yeah, why didn't you do that? You've been...
Well, I mean, I guess I would flip that right back and say, well, why didn't Trump build the wall? And why didn't he make Mexico pay for it? Because
That
you
is
have
fair
to deal
point.
with Congress. Because adults who understand what the legislative process entails understand that the executive branch is separate from the legislative branch and they have to work together. And if you have a divided Congress, it's hard to pass your goals. So in order to get Kamala's goals achieved, we've got to flip the House and we've got to keep the Senate.
I think Donald Trump would say, my record as president was great.
I would say that too.
I mean, it's
You
funny.
would be wrong, but you can say that.
It's the funny thing about Trump. There are folks that can't give Trump credit for anything. Donald Trump had some successes in his administration, as every modern president has had. And I think there's some folks that just can't get over his personality of being a jerk to credit him with some of the things that he's accomplished.
Yeah, I mean, we had a strong economy. We didn't have the inflation we are having now, and you know,
Didn't have
you
the
think,
wars.
well, it didn't have the wars. You also, I mean, look at the judicial appointments and how impactful those have been. I think he was a great president, and I'm looking forward. I've already cast my vote for him, and I'm looking forward to seing him serve another term.
You know,
Just so the record is clear.
the one thing to say here, and I've heard this a lot. I think the role of the vice president in terms of the president making decisions is way overestimated. Okay,
What about a president that might not be all
vice
that
president may or may not be the last one in the room, but it doesn't necessarily mean that their counsel
Mike,
is
do you
the
think,
last
though,
one.
that the American people saw Joe Biden in that debate, and an objective person would say he was not up to being president? Do you think they view her role as vice president differently because we all saw what we saw on television?
I did. I stand by the claim here that I don't think the vice president is the be all to end all in presidential decision
Let's
making.
talk about that Trump record. You said set the record straight.
Yeah, 10% unemployment too when he left office, or close to 10% unemployment because of COVID, which he mismanaged in almost every way possible. And all of his supporters sort of stopped counting his economic record after 3 years instead of the fourth year of COVID. The other thing two dynamics, Scott, that I think are so important to think about in this race. One is Donald Trump is never held to the same standard as any other politician
think that's
I
fair.
have ever covered in a half a century of
Because
covering
he's so
politics.
different than any politician,
He
right?
can say things that would be disqualifying for any other
Has.
politician.
He has said
any
that.
ever has said them. Says them on an hourly
Why is that?
basis.
Why do you think that
I
is?
don't know. I will tell you as a reporter, a journalist, that we sit around all the time trying to figure out why can he say things and get away with things that no other politician. You know, the other day somebody said, boy, you sure get a lot of word salad from Kamala Harris when she did some interview. Are you kidding me? Donald Trump is the definition of word salad.
Hannibal
Sit
Lecter,
there-
anyone?
sit there- I mean,
Somebody
just
why-
take the
I
second-
agree with you, don't you? That
Well,
he
yeah,
gives
and
good
here's the
special
thing
pass.
is, and you hear this all the time, which of these candidates would you like to sit down and have a beer with? I'm not sure anybody wants to sit down and have a beer with Donald Trump.
I would.
I'd have a beer with Trump.
Well, he doesn't
yeah,
drink
I mean,
also, but I want to push back a
Well,
little bit on
but
what
don't
you
trust
said
him on
earlier.
it's the same point, though. I mean,
brought up-
I don't think he's a
you
hell.
brought up folks comparing him to Hitler. I want to say, like, for the record, General John Kelly, his longest-serving chief of staff, is the one who compared him with Hitler.
I mean, that's
Yeah,
stupid
and
for
Donald
General
Trump.
Jelly to
Well,
keep his staff to say.
he was quoting him because
Donald Trump said, I'm Hitler.
no, he said he admired Hitler and his generals.
And I don't think he gets a free pass. I think there have been plenty of Democrats who have done terrible things, and their co-members of Congress have looked the other way, and
Well,
the
I
media
mean,
looks the
one
other
did
way.
leave a woman
Stephanie,
to
you're
drown.
telling me he doesn't.
And
I mean,
so-
he called
but-
Kamala Harris a fascist, a communist, a Marxist,
And she's called
then
him all those same things.
No, she hasn't. That's the whole point. He gets away with it, and it's not just her; it's anyone.
But
she,
Yes,
you know,
he
And
does
what's
have
the
a
latest
special-
ad that they're currently running?
so-
Elon Musk calling her a C word?
Yeah. So, but I will
Party
say
of
this.
family values, right?
The other thing
communist.
to keep in mind,
that's not
quite
what it
apart
says.
from this
Oh.
argument or this discussion, is if Harris has an advantage going into the final week, I do think she has much smarter political people around her than Donald Trump. That
would
means
agree with that.
organization. Where do we need to be? Where do we need to spend
Yeah, I
money?
think part of
How
this
can we
too-
get out the vote? I think Trump is doing it all on the fly
I mean,
and hopes that
Oh,
his,
because he only values loyalty.
Yeah.
Trump has
Not
his daughter, who
expertise.
I think is an impressive person. He's got the two
Yeah.
sons that are not. And I think that the daughter might not be involved in this, and the two idiot sons might be heavily involved.
Yeah, and some of the other folks around him probably don't have the strategic sense that the Harris people
That
have.
Ivanka
And if
seems
she
a shrewd
wins,
operator.
I think it's because she's going to get the turnout she needs in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania particularly. in ways that they don't, on the Trump side, completely understand.
And they definitely didn't do any favors to themselves with this rally and the discouraging and disparaging ways they were talking about Latinos, specifically people from Puerto Rico.
You know, the other place, since we're talking, you know, at 30,000 feet here, don't dismiss the battleground state of North Carolina in this, because North Carolina's Republican gubernatorial candidate is just a trash fire.
And he says the things that Trump
Mark
says.
Robinson.
Yeah, Mark Robinson, and I think he is going to be a drag on the national ticket. He's going to be a drag on the state ticket for the Republicans in North Carolina, and you know, people, you know, that race is like all the battleground states, very, very close right now.
What do you think?
Well, she is such a bad candidate that even some of the liberal media outlets are now not coming out with endorsements for Kamala. I think that speaks of the level of like her candidacy in general.
I don't think she's a star candidate.
When she's not, and when we go back to Trump, I think it's actually refreshing. You might call it word salad, but whatever is rolling around up here comes right out of his mouth, and it's an authenticity and a relatability that people really enjoy.
Yeah.
Mike Mahoney, I've always felt like you understood that guy in Independence that gets off on Friday having a beer. That guy likes Donald Trump. That guy watched Mike Mahoney on the news forever. I always felt like you get that guy. Explain to me why that guy likes Trump.
What he likes, he likes all the big hard talk. All right. Okay. And I think when Penn gets put to paper on this, his record on COVID was a disaster, okay? And his record on the economy is not what people remember it to be, okay? When Donald Trump says that gas is $7 a gallon, he goes, yeah, and then he's going to go and fill up his tank for $2.95, $2.85, or whatever gas prices are right now. But they relate to Trump because he seems to them to represent their voice in terms of how they feel disenfranchised by their governments at every level, okay? The local level, state, and national.
It's a middle finger to authority. Right?
Yeah, and I don't know that Trump did this deliberately, but it morphed into it, and he's wrote it like a lion.
Yeah, we need to consider, of course, the flip of that question, which is what about the 35-year-old mom who lives in suburban St. Louis or in suburban Kansas City who has to explain Donald Trump to her children? Right. And when they come up and say, why did the president talk like that, mommy? She has to, and she is exhausted with that. And I think the biggest problem Trump has
fatigue is true. I like that.
is Trump fatigue. People are just tired of his
It is a lot of drama.
Mess and drama, and 4 more years of this. 4 more years of explaining to your friends and family why the President of the United States speaks in the way he does. And I do think that in some states, particularly again the battleground states, there's going to be a sense of, okay, the only way Republicans will get back to some sense of normalcy, which by the way this country needs, right, is to say goodbye to Donald Trump and turn to the younger generation of Republicans.
Who wins?
Oh, I think she wins. She wins by 3 or 4 points. Yeah.
Comfortably?
Yes.
When my kids look at TV and see things blowing up across the world, that's what I have to talk to them about, not about the conversation you just said.
Blowing up where?
All over.
Israel,
that wasn't
Ukraine,
happening. Yeah, that wasn't happening under Trump.
But
and
how
those
did
are
you
the
explain
conversations.
Charleston to them? How do you explain school shootings to them?
So Trump's going to win.
Who's going to win this race?
I think Trump is going to win the Electoral College. Kamala Harris wins the popular vote, and if it is, and if it's the other way around, and Trump finds himself on the losing end of this, hold on to your hats, because it's going to make 2020 and the early in January of 2021 look like a circus.
You're saying Trump winning the popular vote but losing in the Electoral College?
No. If he loses at all, in any way, shape, or form,
he's going to lose.
Especially if it costs him the presidency, we are in for
I'm with you
terrible
on him
time.
winning. I actually think it won't be quite that bad. I just think.
I hope you're right.
When it's the end of the road, I think he's going to find fewer people willing to go and just ruin their. Who wants to be Rudy Giuliani today? I mean, who totally ruined his life.
Apparently Rudy Giuliani, who spoke at Madison Square Garden, he hasn't
Well,
learned
I think
the
he's
lesson,
pot
so.
committed. I think I'd call. He's
I hope they paid him some money.
Yeah, he's done. Let's talk. Your newspaper came out and had a critique of Josh Hawley. I thought this Senate race, frankly, was a 13, 14-point race. Lucas Kunce has raised a lot of money.
He has.
I felt like there was a chance for it to get a little tighter, but I don't know if that's materializing, is it?
No. Again, the problem that Democrats have statewide is very clear in Missouri. Lucas Kunce is actually a pretty good candidate. He has a military background. He's well-spoken. You know, he shot a reporter. That's probably not a good thing.
It was
but
the best day of his campaign.
Yeah, he didn't shoot a reporter, just so we're clear. But that incident could cause a little bit of a bobble. But again, Josh Hawley is a very good candidate. He's a horrible senator, but he's a good candidate.
Mike Mahoney, I think this race, it showed me that Josh Hawley had a few vulnerabilities. He was not going to get defeated in the state of Missouri in 2024. However, I don't know that Lucas Kunce was really there to capture. I mean, you might hit him for going to Yale. That would be something that might stick. You might hit him for not being genuine when he was running away from the protesters. I don't know that Lucas Kunce comes off as the person to take advantage of maybe a vulnerability that Senator Hawley had.
Lucas Kunce needed Josh Hawley to screw up a couple of more times during this campaign in order to have a real shot at it. And to Hawley's credit, he didn't do that.
What would a screw up look like?
Oh, I'm not sure. It would have been something along the lines of maybe having a blow up with a protester somewhere, getting in a bad shouting match. Saying something untoward, which would be really unlikely because he's pretty careful with words. But Kunce needed a bad screw up or two.
Well, the other thing about Lucas,
just hang on, bad screw up or two to cast enough doubt among Missouri voters who are not really enamored with Josh Hawley. I mean, he's okay.
There's some truth to that.
Okay, but they're not enamored with him to try and go kick the tires with somebody else.
Yeah,
and Kunce didn't have those screw-ups.
The other thing with Lucas Kunce is he ran a sort of Republican light. He had the guns. I'm in the military. It's the Claire McCaskill
Missouri
approach.
Democrats need to run to win statewide.
And Claire McCaskill was an incumbent and ran that way and got creamed by Josh Hawley because when given a choice, Republicans in Missouri will pick the real thing and not the pretend thing. And I think he needed to be a little more aggressive about saying, look, I have a different approach rather than I can shoot guns too.
Stephanie, why can't you get Kehoe to take Josh Hawley to Buckeye and buy some clothes? I mean, the both of them look like I don't know people that dress like Lucas Kunce and Josh Hawley.
Yeah, they stand out a little bit at the state fair.
They
go together, don't they?
Yeah, kind of.
That was such a moment that brought us all together.
But we're talking about mistakes. I know, and I think I had the same conversation with a friend, 2 weeks ago, and it said 2 weeks out from the election, what could possibly happen that could change the outcome? Now, I don't think it's going to change the outcome, but I did think Lucas had a chance to get within a margin to make him still relevant.
Yeah.
And I think, billing yourself as the military macho guy and then having this gun accident really hurts his authenticity.
Yeah, or hurts his argument, his closing argument. With Josh Hawley, who, by the way, has done a great job of sort of avoiding any, not only stumbles, but really any campaigning or controversy
very
at all
smart
in the state of Missouri. Very smart man.
You have to hand it. When you see Josh Hawley on television, he comes off very authoritative, very intelligent. He has a very good presence on TV. Mm-hmm. Do you think the result of this campaign is we see more of him in the state of Missouri?
No, absolutely not. And I think if he's so comfortable with this campaign, he's certainly running as though he's not. He's certainly running as though he's afraid. So I don't know if he's had bad internal polling in the past, but he's certainly been running as though he's
that's
behind.
how you should run, right? I mean, if you're Josh Hawley,
I don't disagree, but if this state is as ruby red as I'm told it is, then I don't know why he's needing to do that.
Right after this, look for him to begin to pivot to more seriously explore a national campaign in 4 years.
And he will be, his problem is that he is hated in Washington, D.C. by his own party. Mm-hmm. And that's a big challenge for Hawley going forward.
I think it's a big challenge for bringing home resources to Missouri.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Ted Cruz seat, where, everybody hates him because he's on Fox News all the time and doesn't actually legislate. So
I think Hawley is smart enough. He could do all that talking on Fox News and all that and actually bring home money to Missouri. I think the guy has that intellectual
money. It's just
but
money.
you have to build relationships in order to do that.
Yes,
right.
I agree with you.
And he doesn't in the Senate, which is built on relationships. The U.S. Senate, as I say, it's the Ted Cruz seat. Everybody hates Ted Cruz in the Republican Party in Washington as well. So if Hawley can pivot that way, then I think Mike is right. I do think he has national ambitions, but he's got to fix that problem first.
What's Hawley's margin on election night?
58, 59.
What do you think?
I think he wins by 5.
Ooh, what do you think?
I'll take that.
I third that emotion.
I'll double it. I think Josh Hawley wins by 10. It could have been a 5-point race. I just don't think there's enough contrast there between Luke. Luke Schoon's a good candidate. I don't know he was the right matchup for Josh Hawley.
Which doesn't make him a good candidate.
I think you're also right about that, Mr. Mahoney. Mike Mahoney, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it. Stephanie Bell, thank you. Representative Ingle, thank you so much. Dave Hilling, thank you so much for being here. We will be back here. I guess it's going to be another, 2 years from now for an election special on KMOS. Thank you so much for joining us. Remember, Tuesday, get out and vote.